Hello, this lecture is going to focus on Mannerism. Hopefully you find it as interesting as I do. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And what we're looking at here is a work by the artist El Greco. And El Greco is famous, and his work crosses the line between Renaissance and Mannerism. So let me go ahead and set the stage for you just a little bit before we start talking about Mannerism and its aesthetic characteristics. So Mannerism starts pretty early in the 16th century, roughly like 1520, and it goes to the end of the 16th century, so about 1600. And Mannerism has a very distinct style, as you will see as we go through these images. And it creates a sense of unease almost. And there's a very good reason for that. So think about what's going on in the early 16th century, okay? So in 1492, Columbus discovered the New World, okay? So you have this knowledge that your world is literally expanding. You have all these new fruits and vegetables and animals being brought in from the New World. Okay, so we've looked at the Renaissance, and we've looked at humanism and the rise of the individual. But then coupled with this, you have anxiety about what's going on. So we have the discovery of the New World, and we have people like Copernicus, okay, who is looking into the sky, and he is determining, along with others, that the sun is the center of the universe, not the earth. Okay, and this is something that is so antithetical. It's so opposite to what is believed at the time that Galileo, who also does research in this area, is persecuted for heresy, right? So this means that he has said something so untrue against what the church believes that he is subject to the Inquisition, he's subject to torture. Okay, so this is a really big deal. So we have the New World, we have this concept that the earth is no longer the center of the universe as has been thought, right? So it is just part of a bigger universe, and we revolve around the sun. So there's a lot of uncertainty related to the earth's place in the universe and our place in the universe. You also have the Reformation, which we talked about, and that starts in 1517 with Luther and his 95 Theses. Okay, and there's a lot of tension between the church and Protestants. There is torture, there are killings. So the Inquisition is set up by the church, and if anyone has ever watched Elizabeth, the movie about Queen Elizabeth, right, it starts with the burning of Protestants because the Queen in England is devoutly Catholic. And so you have this going on all over Europe. You have this great tension, and there's this lack of acceptance of other religions or other forms of religion. Okay, and then you have the Council of Trent in 1545 to 47, which basically is the Counter-Reformation. So it's the church reaffirming its stance and saying that the way the objects were depicted is in fact good. You have what's called the 30 Years' War, and this lasts from 1618 to 1648. So this is a bit later. This is after Mannerism essentially ends, but this is something that most of Europe is involved, and it's largely because of conflicts between Protestants and Catholics. Okay, it leads to a political restructuring of Europe, and this didn't come out of nowhere. Okay, so just to give you an idea of how tense these times are, there's a lack of certainty, there's a lack of peace, there is a lack of just the ability to be calm and comfortable. Okay, and we're going to see this reflected in the work that we're looking at today. So Mannerism. Mannerism has a few very distinctive characteristics, and this work by El Greco does a pretty good job of showing some of these. So El Greco is, he is part of the Spanish Renaissance, and his name means the Greek. And he's known for having these rather mystical images. So here you can see that there's some mysticism. So what we see is the burial of Count Orgaz here, who's depicted here, and he's being surrounded by saints and members of the church, etc. And if we look, we can see that, we can see that there's this figure here, which depicts the soul of Count Orgaz being escorted into heaven. Okay, so you have this kind of mysticism, and we're going to see more mysticism, but you also have these very busy canvases. You're not entirely sure where your eyes should go. And you have these unnatural figures. Look how elongated these legs are, right? And look at this putai here, this little cherub creature. Okay, look at the body, how unnatural it is, how it's twisting. Okay, and we have sometimes there's a focus on musculature that is perhaps somewhat distorted, and we have these really shrill colors. So Mannerism is essentially depicting a level of intellectual sophistication that has perhaps not been present in art that we've seen previously. And it's embracing the artificial nature, the contrived nature of art itself. All right, it's also a reaction against the Renaissance with its idealized figures and it's perfectly mathematical and logical, right? Remember how logical the Italian Renaissance was, how mathematical, right? Think of those very symmetrical buildings that we looked at, right? So it is a reaction against the Renaissance. And the Renaissance starts by showing man as he appears naturally, and then transforms into what's known as the High Renaissance, where you have ideally beautiful figures, you overcome nature's blemishes, and Mannerism pushes that a step further. So not just idealized, but outside of nature entirely. And it distorts figures in the interests of subjective expression. Okay, so here we start to see more of art and artistic expression in a way that we haven't necessarily seen. And this is an image by El Greco as well. And this is depicting Laocoon, who you may remember we looked at as one of the classical sculptures where we had Laocoon and his son struggling against the serpents. All right, and look at how elongated this figure on the right is and the one on the left, and the musculature. Okay, so, and the almost wavy characteristics, and look how menacing it is. Your eye doesn't know where to go. There's this overcast sky. It's incredibly busy. There is clearly some kind of story going on beyond just Laocoon and his sons being strangled by these snakes, being killed by these snakes. Okay, and so you have this very high level of sophistication, you have this high level of stories, and so these become almost a game to their patrons. And you have to have a certain level of intellectual sophistication in order to be able to interpret what you are seeing. Okay, so again, look at the musculature and how elongated and stretched, how attenuated these figures are. Okay, this is another El Greco, which is a bit earlier, but you can still see this emphasis on the distorted body. Okay, so there's this very strong emphasis on the emotions of these figures, okay, how elongated they are. You'll often have shrill colors. So this is by the artist Pontormo. And again, it's a portrait, so it's somewhat naturalistic. It's depicting this man as he would have appeared in real life, but it's also changed him. Okay, so look how small his head is in comparison with the bulk of his shoulders. All right, so you have this, this emphasis on these very small, delicate heads, and you have things that are distorted, like look at his hands and the position of his fingers. Okay, this is the Descent from the Cross by Pontormo, and again, where is the eye drawn? It's drawn to the center of the canvas, but Unlike, say, Raphael, who had the triangular composition with the Madonna typically at the apex or the top of the triangle, our eye is drawn to an area with no figures. Okay, and so this is deeply unsettling, and you have these very shrill colors. These are not rich colors. Think of the ceiling of the Scrivini Chapel, the Arena Chapel by Giotto. Think of that deep, rich blue. Okay, think of the colors used by Raphael. Even if they're bright, they're still quite rich, but these are almost like a poisonous green and this rather sickly pink. Okay, look at the shape of Christ's figure, the way that this individual's back is bending in a completely unnatural way. All right, you have this hole in the center. It just all over creates a sense of unease. Okay. So again, you have something similar. The center of the composition, this is by Fiorentino, and this is another deposition. So deposition is the removal of Christ's body from the cross. And you have these figures displaying extreme emotion, but they're stretched. So we're seeing some diagonals across the canvas. We have this very sickly skin color for Jesus. Yes, he is deceased, but this is particularly putrid. His flesh is almost putrefying before our eyes, okay? And this uneasy emptiness in the center. So here's a better look at Christ's skin, okay? The emotions apparent on the figures. So very dramatic gestures. This is the Madonna of the Long Neck by Parmigianino. And so this is an example of a Madonna holding the Christ child, but it's also a Pietà. So think of the Pietà by Michelangelo and how he talked about it is the Virgin Mary holding the body of Christ after he's been crucified and the feelings of sorrow that it evokes. Okay, so again, we have this very abstracted story in the background. We have a prophet here, and we have a column that stands alone. It's isolated. It doesn't seem to tie in. We again had these very elegant figures. Look at the hands, how elegant they are. But the body is contorted and elongated. Again, we see the small head with the Madonna and the oversized lap to be able to accommodate the body of Christ, who again is stretched. And this Christ is unsettling. It is a baby, it is sleeping, but this Christ is made to resemble a dead Christ. And so it's prefiguring the crucifixion, but it's also a very unsettling sort of image. This is another Parmigianino. This is self-portrait in a convex mirror. And so you can see that he is playing a trick on the eye. So he is painting this, and this canvas is round, and it's meant to look like if you were looking at a mirror that kind of bubbles outward, how your face would be distorted. And so we have this very elegant face, but then this hand is extremely elongated. And think about what your hand would look like if you were looking into a bubble mirror. Okay, so he is accurately depicting this. So just again, emphasizing the musculature as well as these elongated bodies, these very elegant individuals. Okay, so even the horses have small heads compared with their bodies. All right, so just this extreme emphasis on sophistication and style, and the almost hiding of the storyline in order to create a very elegant canvas. This is a work that is in the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Arts, and it looks very naturalistic. It's incredibly detailed. But what we're looking at is actually a Mannerist piece. And you can really see this very well in the hand and how elongated and distorted the hand is. But you can see the real beauty and emphasis that has gone into depicting the textures of her fashion naturally. And you can see his chubby little hand, but also details like there is dirt under her fingernail here. Okay, so these are not perfect, idealized humans. These have been tweaked. Okay, so again, look at the body, how unnatural it is. Moving forward, okay, this is another Bronzino. So you have these very erudite, very intellectually abstracted stories. We're still not sure what this one means. So this is the goddess Venus with her son Cupid here, and we have this female that turns into a snake, and we have this agonizing figure, and so there's a lot going on, and it would require a very sophisticated level of intelligence and able to be ordered to interpret. In order to be able to interpret, wow, sorry, don't know why that was so difficult. Again, this emphasis on elegance, the small heads, these very shrill colors, okay? This is Veronese, and this would have been on a ceiling, so you would be looking up, hence the foreshortening. But again, just these slightly distorted figures. Okay, this is a Giambologna, the Rape of the Sabine Women. And so we see these figures twisting and almost becoming one. And so the Rape of the Sabine Women is that one tribe of men did not have enough women, and so they raid the Sabine tribe and they steal their women and force them to become their wives. So in this context, rape means the abduction, but it would also inevitably lead to rape. So it's not that inaccurate a term. But look at the musculature of this crouching figure and the musculature of the back here and the distress and the contortions of these bodies. All right, and we also have a Northern Mannerism or Antwerp Mannerism, and this really focuses on many of the same things, but there are others in this movement, in this artistic style, who really emphasize the musculature, and they take the human body and they just continue distorting it, right? So we have all these idealized bodies from the Renaissance, and so they're just pushing it a step further. If we take this even further, if we continue to modify the body, what will it look like? And so you're left with musculature that creates these very lumpy looking men. And it's not exactly clear what's going on. I mean, obviously they're wrestling, but it's kind of an unsettling image, and you have these very, very distorted figures, this musculature, this foreshortening. Okay, you have something like this where this mythological character is falling, and you can see like the pits of hell, and so this distortion, etc. So hopefully you found that interesting. I personally am very intrigued by Mannerism, and I will catch up with you soon. Okay.